Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Special Town Council meeting for April 23rd, 2014 for budget workshops. We'll begin by rising for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, if you wouldn't mind calling the roll, please.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Letourneau.
Here.
Mansfield.
Here.
Parisi. Russo.
Here.
Sullivan. Testa.
Here.
Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Thank you. And we will begin the workshops for the evening with the Public Utilities Commission budget, page 62, for those following in a book.
Pardon? Should just let the three commissioners. Well, that's true. Good evening.
Good evening.
And how is everybody this fine night?
I think we're okay. If you could
Well,
just
I hope so.
kindly remind us who you are, even though we know.
Yeah. Bob Beaumont, Chairman of the PUC, George Adair, Director of Public Utilities. First order of business being the Public Utilities Commission. Changes in that, no additional personnel of any sort. The only personnel that we have in there are the director, his executive secretary, and then we do have the PUC secretary, and then you have the three commissioners. Change in the dollars here on that, looking at the salary line, what that reflects is there is no change in the commissioners' salaries or remuneration of any description. Secondly, it does include the executive secretary getting a raise as of 7/1. That is along with Unit 1183. That's standard. That's based on that union contract. Even though she is not in it, her salary follows that. Other than that, this year the commission did in fact give Mr. Adair a 5% raise in recognition of the fact basically that it's an upgraded position in many respects because of the fact that he is now handling power supply, overseeing that, which is a function that was totally not within the scope of what he was doing prior here too. So that actually is effective during this fiscal year. This does show that increase for the upcoming fiscal year. In addition to that, then there is the 1.95% raise effective 1/1/2015 that the management union did receive. No other changes here with regard to the PUC. That, in a nutshell, I think covers it all.
Thank you very much. Councilors, do we have any questions on the Public Utilities Commission budget? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. This transportation allowance, who is that for?
Basically, that's travel expenses for the commissioners as far as for any traveling that we may do it. Case in point, I mean, when we were going back and forth to CMEC, for meetings, et cetera, any traveling of that ilk. That is what it has been referred to for years as, Craig.
So is that an account that is drawn against, or is that just paid out and it doesn't matter?
It's just paid out.
Okay, so whether any travel is done by commissioners or not, it's still paid out.
That is correct.
And traveling to CMEC is an unusual situation.
Today.
Yeah, and I would expect that during the next year, that's probably not going to happen at all.
No.
So, because we're dealing with next year's budget, why would we have this transportation allowance?
I guess the best answer, I guess the best answer I can give you, is the only answer I can give you, Craig, very honestly, is that is something that has been there for years now. This would also take care of such things as if we were driving up to E&E, as an example, up in Foxborough, and we don't go up there anywhere near as regularly as we were down to CMAC, but when we do, it's significantly further, of course. You're talking round trip on that is about 100 and almost 200 miles, I guess, by the time you get finished up there. So it does, but we do go up there occasionally for meetings, for briefings, et cetera.
Don't you think it would make more sense if it was just an account line and there was, if there was travel, that it was credited against that account? And that way, if it's used, it's used. If it's not, it's money that's there.
What's the question?
Well, it's this transportation allowance that seems to be an additional stipend, whether it's used or not. And what I'm hearing from Commissioner Beaumont is
Right.
that's the way we've always done it.
No, and
So it's still
that's a
there.
legitimate answer.
So I suggested that perhaps it's an account line that can be credited against, as opposed to just paying it out whether or not it's used. And that was the question, and it was deferred to the other table.
We do have line items in the budget for transportation reimbursement versus transportation allowance.
Oh, I understand the
If
difference.
they wish to do that, we can set it up that way. But
This is meant to,
allowance.
it's meant to cover where commissioners, they go to scenes of devastation in town when the crews are out working. They do travel to a variety of meetings. They're expected to be available, and this helps to offset those costs. I mean, I think it's also true for, is it planning and zoning? Planning and zoning has, planning and zoning, and at one time, I think the council had, I don't know if you still do.
No, we don't, and that's the distinction that I'm trying to draw here. I mean, we go to meetings, we go to things. It just doesn't seem,
Well,
Well-
it was meant to be an ability to cover transportation expenses. I mean, it could all be put in one line, salary.
well,
Craig,
Because that's how it shows up ultimately in terms of what is paid to the commissioners. That would be part of remuneration for salary.
I
What that
understand.
also-
The
what that also
representation is
includes-
that we don't know that it's going to be used in the next year, and I'm not looking to get rid of it. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if it's
No.
not going to be used,
But it will be used because it is a payment to them. It's meant to cover their costs in transportation, whether it's in town or out of town. Like I said, then, given that it's ordinary income, there's not a filing of mileage or anything, then it should be included in the salary line.
Yeah. As a point of information, another place where we do end up using it is, as an example, we've been dealing with the phosphorus issue with DEEP. Meetings in Hartford, meetings in Southington or Meriden, et cetera, that one of the commissioners may go to along with the staff. There are a number of different things that we travel to. Yes, CMAC at one point was probably the longest distance we generally went, but there are other things that we do, not the least of which is dealing with Hartford. I've been up there a number of times, over the years, testifying before the state legislature and for various other meetings.
I know, but then you get into the whether or not it's necessary
Mm-hmm.
that commissioners go with staff to these things. I don't want to get there. I
No,
just,
and I'm just trying to I'm just trying to be fair
drawing a
to give you a full
distinction
answer, Craig.
between how we deal with other departments, because some
Can I
other
ask
departments
the,
are reimbursement.
Could I ask the comptroller a quick question?
Absolutely.
Jim, is this something set up, the idea is use of personal vehicles for town business and perhaps in the aim of efficiency rather than a whole series of small disbursements for mileage? Was this perhaps why this is done in I think it's $450 over all three commissioners.
Yes, and it also avoids, there's no record keeping required of the commissioner. It is taxed.
Yes.
Reimbursement is not taxed.
Right.
A person, if I needed to use my personal vehicle to go somewhere, to Hartford, to sell bonds at our bond selling place, I would either take a town vehicle if one were available, or if I took up my own vehicle, it's a reimbursement rate somewhere 50 cents a mile, whatever the IRS rate is at that time.
I got the
So
concept.
mine would be a reimbursement. Theirs is not a reimbursement. Theirs is actually an allowance, and therefore it's taxable.
And I'm
since
just
they don't document it.
looking at, like, Board of Ed is dealt with differently. Board of Ed is a reimbursement. This is not. And I'm just looking at why it's being done in this particular fashion. I understand the concepts, but the difference in how this is handled is, I'm just looking at that. That's all. That's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, any other questions from counselors? Okay. On to the Water Division, page 73. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Once again, remind us who you are. I know, but
Okay,
for the
I have to
benefit.
make sure I know. I'm Roger Dan, General Manager of Water and Sewer Division. To my right is Bill Phelan, who is the Office Manager for Water and Sewer.
Thank you. Do you have any introductory comments?
I've got about a 3-hour prepared statement, if that's acceptable.
If you can cut it down
Do you
to
have any
3
questions?
minutes.
Are there questions for us?
I think if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If you'd
Okay.
like some introductory statements, we can do that as well.
I think Councilor Letourneau has some questions for you.
Good evening, gentlemen. On page 74, under customer account expenses, line number 903. Customer records, and I'm going to assume it's collection expenses, or what exactly is that?
There are a number of expenses that fall under that account, the largest of which are related to the labor and benefits that are attributable to the maintenance of customer billing and customer records. There's also a significant amount in that account that pays for the postage for mailing of bills, smaller amounts that deal with some of the other billing or meter-related type expenses.
And is this, the money that's in here, are you starting or have you already started billing together with the electric division, or not yet?
No, what we have progressed to is the reading of the water meters by electric division staff. But the next step of that, if it's ever to take place, which would be to try to look at some sort of combined billing system, is still out there to be studied. It needs to be looked at carefully, and the business case needs to be looked at carefully to balance whatever perceived benefits there are against the additional expenses that we'd incur.
Okay. And what is your uncollectibles?
Well, we don't typically have something we would refer to as uncollectibles.
Okay.
You will have a certain number of customers at any given time who are delinquent in their payments. However, one of the major advantages that we have in both water and sewer is the ability to place liens on property. And therefore, that ultimately affords us protection. It's very, very infrequent, only probably 3 or 4 accounts over the time I've been here that actually fell into the category of being uncollectible, and those were situations where a property went to foreclosure and the value of the property was insufficient to satisfy the taxes and water and sewer both.
Okay. And that doesn't happen too often right now?
Very, very infrequently.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Laffin is yielding, so Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much money is in retained earnings for the Water Division?
Let me describe the process that we go through, because the term retained earnings is probably not, I'm guessing, but probably not the number that you're really looking for, because,
I'm looking for unencumbered funds.
okay. So what we look at the end of each fiscal year is we look at our cash position. And within that cash position, we then look at things such as how much money we need for cash flow purposes, what we have within that is set aside in various reserves. We have a number of reserves in both divisions that exist for maintenance of facilities, replacement of facilities, workers' compensation awards, emergency repair purposes, things such as that. And we also look at all of the amount of that which has previously been appropriated and therefore has been committed to projects that may not yet be completed. At the end of that process, we develop a number that we refer to as the cash, the unappropriated cash balance, or projected, it's a cash above minimum is what we refer to that as. That is, in fact, in our eyes, the amount of money we have available to look at when we take into account things like rate increases. How much cash do we have to potentially smooth a rate increase out or things like that. So that's sort of a long way of describing the process, but to give you the actual numbers, in the Water Division, the amount of that at the end of last year was just under $600,000. And
Let me just correct you, total reserves for last year in Water Division?
well, I'm providing the number. There were a number of reserves, as I indicated,
okay.
that is deducted. That is after accounting for the reserves. There are,
And that's just the Water Division. We'll deal with sewer separate.
that's just the Water Division.
Okay.
Okay.
And the reason why I ask is on page 76, we have an appropriation. Well, there is no request this year. There was an appropriation 13-14 of almost $600,000. And is that's from that fund? Is that what
Yes.
you're-
Yes. If we were to make an appropriation like that, that's where we would be looking for it.
And when that was done in 13-14, from the legend, that was for rate stabilization, and we're not anticipating doing that this year.
That's correct.
Now, water rates are going up. And is it fair to say that instead of, because there's only $600,000 in these reserves, so to speak, you really can't deplete that for rate stabilization? Is that fair to say?
Well, I think that we've established a targeted figure to have there that provides us with a little bit of a cushion for unexpected occurrences. And certainly in recent years, we've seen revenues that have fallen well below projections. So if that were to happen, and we come in, $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 under the projected revenues, then this affords us a little bit of cushion to deal with that, short of having to immediately implement a rate increase. So we've established a target there. We'd like to see about $750,000. So we're already slightly below that, and that's one of the reasons why we're not projecting any draw on that in the proposed budget.
Okay, that all makes sense. Looking at your capital program on page 11 of your backup, and I want to thank you for your backup. It was very detailed. I just had some questions as to what some of these lines are, because they're really nondescript. We have $102,000 transportation equipment, and I didn't see a list as to what that is. Do we know? I'm sure you know.
There are two vehicles that are proposed in that. One is a replacement dump truck, and that's the vast majority of it. That's estimated at $95,000. The other is a $7,000 amount, which we are proposing to use to actually acquire a electric division vehicle, one that they are rotating out, but we could use on a more limited basis in our engineering section. And so we have an amount in there to compensate the electric division for what we think the market value of that vehicle is going to be. And we've sort of had this program over the years. We have certain vehicles that we kind of rotate out of more regular use into more infrequent use when we think they have a couple more years of life in them, rather than replace them with brand-new vehicles.
Yeah, thank you. I just couldn't tell from the backup. The distribution system from developers, the next, the line 2 from the bottom, what is that, the 250,000?
That is an account where we recognize the value of pipe that may be installed by developers within subdivisions. So the process is that if a developer proposes subdivision that has water mains within it, and those water mains are proposed to ultimately be owned by the water division, at the completion of the project, when we accept those and they become our property, we reflect the value of those. So it's a contributed value that we reflect within our accounting system.
Ergo, the contributed capital, it's not an expenditure, it's an acquisition.
Right. There are a few other things that fall into that category. For example,
Services.
Services,
to
right.
go
Yeah,
in.
that's the next line. I was
That's
going to
the
ask you
next
about that. If you could just, the services would be the installation, which ordinarily one would pay for,
Right.
and here
Correct.
you're getting the benefit.
right. So
All
it's
makes-
contributed to the extent that the customer is paying us, and then we go out and do the installation.
Okay, I think that's all that I had on that particular budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Counselor Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just had some clarifying questions. On page 19 of your backup, and again, I applaud your detail and providing this information. There's just a line item that refers to the number of positions that were authorized but unfunded. Is that just reflecting a correlation to dropped consumption and usage and revenue, or is that you haven't found the right bodies yet? It's a skill set mismatch. I wondered what was going on with the 7.
Well, what that really is a long-term record of where we are versus where we may have been any number of years ago. So over time, for example, through improvements in meter reading or other changes that we've made, we've been able to unfund positions and reduce our staff to achieve the same goal. So it's kind of more for our purposes, so we don't forget that we've actually done some good things along the way in terms of efficiency.
Perfect. I just wondered that, and that's a good answer to hear from an efficiency standpoint. And just one other clarification on lines 673, 675, 676. This is on page 74. Transmission and distribution expenses. If you can just comment, it looks like the appropriation from 2013 to 14, and then what you're requesting for next year, it seems to have dropped. Not that that's a bad thing from an expense standpoint. I just wondered if that, again, is correlated to if there's any specific driver contributing to the expense, if I'm reading this correctly.
You are, and starting first with 673, because that's the largest drop that you see there. In the current budget year, we had a major project there. We're doing replacement of the pipe hangers and pipe insulation on 2 bridge crossings over I-91. So next year, obviously, we won't be doing that again, so that results in a significant reduction. The other factor, and it actually affects all 4 of those accounts, 673 through 677, is that each year we take a look back at where our labor was actually utilized, and we make adjustments to the labor amounts that we include in various accounts. So our labor is distributed amongst a variety of accounts throughout the budget, And in this particular case, those 4 accounts all see a reduction in the amount of labor being allocated to those accounts. Now, somewhere in here, you'll see the corresponding increase because it's going somewhere.
There's a balancing act, I'm sure, but, okay. No, thank you. That was it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from councilors on the Water Division line? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the, let's look at 926, administrative and general expenses. This is the employees' pension and benefits. It appears that you requested $374,873, but the mayor approved $368,750, a decrease of approximately $7,000. What's going on here? I mean, funding pensions is important.
What had occurred there is that we received some initial indication as to the percentage increase that we would experience on the health benefit portion of things. And after our budget was prepared and submitted to the mayor, in fact, it was determined that a lower percentage of increase would take place in those areas. And so the reductions were made at the mayor's review, or at his level, to reflect the fact that, in fact, the health benefits were not going up as much as what we had initially expected.
Okay, and similarly, I am seeing reductions. Well, there's a capital reduction. Let's look at maintenance, transmission, and distribution. It's a small reduction. It's about $2,000. Am I to understand that all of these reductions were reviewed by the mayor and they've been approved by you prior to it coming to us?
Yeah, what happened, and I'm not looking at that account specifically, but it's similar to the labor distributions. The benefits are also distributed out to all of those accounts where labor is being distributed. So when you make a change to the health benefits, it in turn results in changes that are reflected in a number of accounts throughout the budget. So we were aware that those changes were going to take place. Obviously, there's no purpose to budgeting at a higher level than necessary. It's just that between our budget preparation and when the mayor finalized his budget, that changes had occurred and lower numbers could be shown.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and that's why I picked out one that it appears to be a capital expenditure, which the health insurance decrease would not affect. This maintenance, transmission, and distribution.
Well, actually, some of the labor is also allocated to capital accounts.
Okay, so that would be attributable to that decrease,
Right.
you believe also? Okay, I'm comfortable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I may, Councilman, we received the most current guesstimate by our health insurance consultant very late in March, literally with just maybe less than a week before the mayor's budget was due to you folks. So that's why some of these items are changed. The PUC authorized budget is in the department request, so I really didn't think it proper to change the department's request. So it's more or less like just to identify the timeline as well. And as Roger Dan pointed out, they identify where those amounts can be reduced when the health insurance percentage came in a little bit better than we had originally projected.
Thank you.
You're probably going to see that again a little bit tomorrow night and in the benefits night next week,
tonight.
whenever that is.
Thank you.
All set? Councilor Testa?
Thank you, gentlemen. I just wanted clarification to better understand the personnel breakdown. By the way, water tastes great. Thank you very much. I notice, let's put it this way, a lot of the personnel work water and sewer, correct?
Yes.
So if I see there's a half of you underwater, there's the other half, and the salary, your overall salary is divvied up. Anytime we see percentages of people, and the salary, it's the breakdown of the total attributed to either division, correct?
That's correct.
Got it. So you're general manager.
I am.
Okay. Office manager. Got it. Very good. So then if we see superintendents, that would be somebody who's, you have a specific superintendent for water and potentially an assistant or two assistants, and then those are full-time to either division.
Correct. So you'll see a breakdown. Some people are
Got it.
100% to one division or the other. Many
good.
of us split our responsibilities between the two.
Understandable. I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions for the Water Division? Moving on to the Sewer Division, page 79. Counselor Laffin.
Thank you. Good evening, guys. In the backup material on page 4, you're talking about proposed and ongoing projects, and it's the stormwater issue. On page 4, number 7, if I'm reading the right one. So, example, my sump pump used to pump into sewer system, and then when we had our house renovated this past summer, we discovered that it was, and we had it rerouted. And now with the thaw, every 5 to 10 minutes, it probably pumps out 7 to 10 gallons of water into my backyard. So where are we with that project? Because I know that has the potential to save us money, especially on the phosphorus side. Is that accurate? Or?
I don't know the two are directly related.
Okay.
But, it's an impact on our treatment system capabilities, for sure.
If you'll recollect, it was several years ago, we came to the council and asked you to adopt a revised ordinance that dealt with what we refer to as infiltration and inflow, or I&I.
Right.
And that, as you described, it deals with contributions from water sources that really don't belong in the sanitary sewer system. And by the way, we appreciate you removing that.
Anytime.
At that time, there were a couple of things that had to happen, but we had begun through adoption of sewer rates to fund over what was anticipated to be a 4-year period, a project that would seek to go out and basically look at every property in town, looking for those extraneous sources. So first we have to identify them. Through the ordinance, then we have the means to enforce removals. And we're now entering into the 3rd year of funding for that project. In the meantime, staff and the commission has been attempting to work through the sort of the logistics of how to go about doing that. And we're not 100% finished with that process at this point. But the game plan, again, as it was expected, is fund it for 4 years, go out and do that full-scale identification, and then use that as a springboard to try to get removals to occur. So ultimately, we get that flow out. We stop building bigger pipes, bigger pump stations, or even potentially a bigger treatment plant, simply to handle that clear water.
Okay. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Similarly with how we started water, what are the funds being held in reserve?
Okay. We, again, go through that same review process in sewer each year. And so, again, it's the cash less amounts that are in reserves, less capital projects or things that have been appropriated and are committed but not yet completed. In the sewer division, having gone through all that, that amount of cash above minimum that I referred to, that's the amount we have to look at when we talk about the cushion for unexpected things and for rate stabilization. End of last year was a little over $1.7 million. And that's one of the reasons why you see in the proposed budget we're beginning to draw from that a little bit, and we certainly did not propose a sewer rate increase in the upcoming year.
Thank you. Looking at the operating budget, if you want to call it that, which I think ends at the bottom of page 80, one would glean from this that sewer is running at a loss?
it's running at a negative net income, which I guess technically would be considered a loss in an accounting sense. Now, what we need to remember about that is that within the operating budget, we fund depreciation, which is in essence a non-cash expenditure. So if you go back up on that page and you look under the 403 account, you'll see that depreciation is funded at almost $2.2 million. Those funds are recognized as an expense, but they are then added back in later in the budget and provide a source of funds that we can use for capital projects. So in essence, we take that depreciation amount and reinvest that in replacement of the system.
Makes sense, thank you. The, on the next page, page 81, this contribution in aid line, what is that?
Excuse me, let me just get there. I'm sorry. That amount represents, when we take in charges for connection, that is a contribution and aid that comes into our system. So we budget reflecting an expectation that over the course of the year, there'll be a certain number of new connections to the system paying connection charges. And so we recognize that as a source of funds for the division.
And I suppose, well, it's all based upon projections, so we don't have a lot of development going on. So is that the reason why it's a 1/2 cut in last year and this year?
It tends to reflect the most recent history. If you go back and look back a little ways, we've been, closer to 100 than 200,000. But again, that is an estimate. If it were to be higher or lower, we'd reflect what actually occurs.
The regular capital line is quite an increase. I believe it's a 300% increase. But I don't have a breakdown. I looked for one, unless I missed it. What is that attributable to?
There are 3 projects that primarily contribute to that. And those are the need to replace the mixers that are utilized to stir the digesters down at the plant. And I don't recall if you've been down there, but down at the treatment plant you have large cylindrical storage containers in which sludge is being processed and biologically reduced in volume. And those have to be stirred. The mixers that are there are the original mixers that were put in back in the mid-'80s timeframe, and it's time for replacement. So we have $350,000 in here toward the replacement of those mixers. We also have $285,000 budgeted to install a new sewer in a portion of Wall Street. And the reason for that is that we've discovered over the years that Wall Street looks to have been something that sort of was built sort of one connection at a time. The sewer was extended, but doesn't really meet our current standards. We don't actually know where it is over the entire run. And it actually is made up of 2 sewers running up on different sides of the street. So if we run into a need to maintain that, we really have difficulty. It's not built to current standards. So this is a time we're proposing to go in and build one to meet our current requirements. And then finally, again, going back to sort of the age of the wastewater treatment plant, when that facility was constructed, there were underground storage tanks for fuel, diesel and unleaded gasoline stored there. And those tanks are now reaching a point where they need to be replaced. They're reaching, the allowable life expectancy. And so we need to go in, remove those, put in new tanks, and in conjunction with that, We would also replace the fuel pumps and the automated fueling system that controls the operation of those pumps.
And that's about a $300,000 expenditure?
That's $250,000.
Okay. And that's attributable to generally the 661? Between the 285?
Right, between those three, that I think adds up to well north in the 661. So, I mean,
Well, is it-
you always have projects coming in, you have some projects that you're completing and are dropping out, but
There's a separate line for the mixers, and that's reflected at 350, which you had already spoken about, so I'm washing that out. I'm looking at the line above that.
That's in the 332. The Wall Street project is in the 343 account.
I don't have numbers for these accounts. It just says regular capital.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The total of this line is,
$289,000.
the total of this line is 661,000. That's the
If you
line.
were to go to page 82, and you look under the 1415 portion of the, well, actually, if you look up near the top there, the regular capital, the breakdown by individual accounts is there. So the 350,000 you see is in the 332 that you'd already seen. The Wall Street, the 285,000 is contained within the 343 line. And the fuel tank replacement is in the 394 line.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Any other questions on the sewer division budget line? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Moving away from the pipes. And on to the electric division.
Don't blame you at all. Have a good rest of the evening.
Good night.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Just remind us who you are, even though we already know.
Richard Hendershot, General Manager of the Electric Division, and Tom Sullivan, our Business Office Manager.
Thank you. We're on page 67 in our books. Any introductory comments?
No, but we're here to answer, or at least attempt to answer any and all questions the council may have.
Okay. Questions from the council? Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening.
Looking at the uncollectible accounts 904, it's really a minuscule amount compared to your revenue. I mean, the percentages would go out many zeros. What do you attribute that relatively low number to?
You're referring to the $260,000?
Yeah, comparing that to what's $74 million in revenue.
I'm not sure. It's about what it's been, both volume-wise and percentage-wise. It may be attributable to the fact that a large percentage of our revenue comes from commercial and industrial customers. I think Tom can correct me, but I think 60% of our revenues come from our 550 largest customers.
So I guess the threat of shut-off or something like that is the...
Those are usually going concerns. We keep a close eye on them. We have deposits for either 2 or 3 months worth of usage on most of our customers.
It's, yeah, just, I know when I first got up here, I used to make hay about that, but doing the math, it's really a small number. The conservation number on 909, why isn't that number stagnant? I guess it's a twofold question. How is that calculated, is, I guess, the first question. Is that based upon a percentage of anticipated sales?
Yes, we collect a quarter of a cent per every kilowatt hour that we sell.
So as your sales increase, decrease, this number is going to be in line with that also?
Yes. Also, this year, I believe it's going to show a fairly significant increase, and that's because for the first time, we need to include in this budget $350,000, if memory serves, of Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative funds that now will flow directly from Reggie to us, as opposed to just into a holding account at CMEC, from which we used to draw the funds. Previously, because of that path for the funds, we did not show it on our books as income or the expenses when they were drawn from them. Now, though, our share of Connecticut's Reggie funds will come directly to us, so we include them in our budget as revenue and show the expenses of spending those funds.
And Rick, they're spent on conservation work just like the quarter cent.
Yes.
We've tended to use them primarily for the home energy savings, but they don't have to be for that
Correct.
purpose, right?
When you say the home energy, that's a program where somebody can come to the house and look at what you're doing with energy and all that. And is there currently a charge for that?
For the home energy savings program?
Yes, to the
Yeah.
homeowner.
Oh, for the homeowner?
Yes. I know it used to be $75.
I believe it depends, typically not unless the customer is a Yankee Gas customer. Then there's, the way the statutes are written, those customers do have to pay a $75 copay to Yankee Gas. Our program presently collects no copays from our customers.
Okay. I didn't notice in your backup any capital expenditures, trucks, that kind of stuff. Was I missing it?
Well, transportation equipment in particular is in account 392 under general plant.
And that's where that would be? Okay.
Yes, towards the bottom of page 71.
I got it here. And that 285, what is that attributable to?
Give me a moment. Do it from here. That is for a new line truck, a meter reader pickup truck, a meter technician van, and a sedan.
The office furniture and equipment, $122,000. Where is that? What is that? Where is that for?
It's the IVR.
Let me hit, I have in front of me notes, $80,000 of highlights for that, and I can give you more detail if you need it. Included in, this is account 391?
Yes.
Okay. We have $40,000 for an interactive voice response system to connect to our outage management system.
Connect to the what?
Our outage management system.
What's that?
Outage management system is an automated
Oh,
system.
outage.
Outage.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
The interactive voice response, IVR, will, as soon as the call comes in, it can recognize the phone number associated with the customer and begin to populate the OMS with somebody's calling about an outage. It can avoid human intervention if the caller doesn't wish to speak with someone. Therefore, more outage calls can come in more quickly, and the OMS could get the field intelligence that much faster. We can start to then discern what's going on in an outage.
That makes sense, especially like the storms that we've had.
That's when it would be the most useful, is high volume call times, yes.
Yeah. So that's about 40, that's about a third of that line item. What's the next large item in there?
We're going to replace 3 ruggedized laptops that are used by our field engineers, our distribution engineers. among other things that they can do is they can become mobile assessment computers in an outage, gather information that can be brought back, plugged into OMS, and then describe to OMS damage that's been seen, things that are wrong at particular locations, et cetera.
And those rugged laptops, how old are they currently?
We procured used ones from the police department a few years ago, and have used them, modified them from our purposes, but they've gotten that much older, and they're not meeting our needs any longer.
Okay. And then I think the council's talked about this, but I guess for the public, there's a line 390 is quite a bump from $20,000 to 1.08 million. What is that?
The largest item in there is $900,000 to replace a structure at the electric division that we euphemistically refer to as the pole barn, because that's what it was initially made out of. It's the large metal-sided shed in which we presently park 8 of our 9 line trucks. Its origins are that of an early 1980s Agway farm shed that was modified and expanded in the early 90s to accommodate, to go from a 10-bay small vehicle shed to an 8-bay large vehicle shed. The structure is aged. It's nearly, if not completely depreciated, and is not holding up to extreme weather events terribly well. We get lots of water intrusion both in its ceiling and around its floor level. Lineman lockers are out there, as is a lot of equipment, and as I mentioned, these 8 trucks. We'd like to replace that building with an adequate and appropriate utility vehicle garage with some, maybe some, a locker room, a small training or ready room in it, things of that nature.
And is this an item that it would go out to bid?
Oh, yes.
For the construction? And
first we
this
would...
is just a general estimate as to what we think?
Yes, I spoke with an architect who spoke with some suppliers of these sorts of buildings, and we did a very initial swag on size of the building, and based on an educated guess of a square footage, came up with this budgetary figure, and have included some funds in anticipation of site work that would come along with this, the work to get potable water and sewer service to the building. There is none now, increasing the electric service, things of that nature. The first things we do with these funds is to hire an architect through a bid process of some sort to design the building and any modifications of the site that might be required because of the building replacement.
And I take it just basic budgetary, if this line isn't enough, you're gonna have to come before us for more.
Oh, clearly.
The last thing I had is more of an inquisitive nature. Line 431, interest on customer deposits. Is that something that the electric division retains? That's on page 70. Or does that go to the customer?
I'll ask Tom to address that.
That's interest accrued on the customer deposit for as long as it's held by us. For a commercial account, it's held indefinitely. For a residential account, it's held until they've established good credit for a year.
And then does the payor get the interest, or does the electric division retain it?
They will get the interest owed. It'll be
Okay.
returned to them either on their final bill or on a review for a residential, yeah.
Yeah, as I said, it's more of an inquisitive sort of thing. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Letourneau? All right, Mr. Letourneau's all set. Any other questions from councilors? Hearing none, you are off the hook, gentlemen. Thank you for your time and patience. I will, being that we're through our agenda for the evening, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We are in adjournment.